Thank you so much, Michelle, for joining me today. A huge, huge appreciation from right across the world. You're joining me, so it's a real honor for you to spend some time late in your time. I think your time zone in all the way in Melbourne. Is that correct?
It's not too bad. It's about 8 o'clock in the evening, and it's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much.
having me.
And I'm just going to do a quick introduction and then go straight into it. So, huge, huge thanks. So, Michelle Tom began her writing career as a print journalist in her native New Zealand. A chapter from 10,000 Aftershocks placed second in the writers Victoria Marion Grace Wilson Emerging Writers Competition in Nonfiction section in 2019 and appeared in the November issue of the Victoriun Writer. Michelle was one of 5 writers chosen for the week long Varuna Memoir Masterclass with Patti Miller in 2017 and was selected for the ACT Writers Centre HARDCOPY 2010 non-fiction programme. She lives in Melbourne with her husband and her 2 youngest children, which I'm assuming, do you still live with your 2 youngest children, or are they 2 grown up now?
No, they're still here. It'll be a while yet.
Well, at least you get to keep your babies for a little bit longer then.
That's right. They'll still let me cuddle them occasionally.
Fantastic. That's all you could ask for, isn't it?
That's right.
So again, Michelle, what a terrific book, and obviously extremely harrowing read. But just so beautifully written, and I was just wondering, like, what was the moment that kind of inspired you to, or you realized was the right time to actually write the book?
That's a really good question because I think, I think these things are an evolution. And I think for a number of years I had thought, um, if I could get myself organized, it might make a book. There was just sort of things were piling up, things that had happened. And sometimes you look back on your life and think, you know, this is just getting a bit crazy, really, how many things we've had to go through as a family. Um,
Mm.
and I suppose that idea could be 10 years old, but then I didn't really know how to write a book. I'd been a journalist, but that's completely different type of
Mm.
writing. And I think it was only when my sister died that I really became quite galvanized, and I realized that I was the last sibling surviving.
Gosh.
And I felt that the story was one of unforeseen consequences, and it was there was something about it that felt like it should serve as a warning to other people, or it could serve as a warning to other people. Um, my sister had when she died, I just thought, right, okay, let's give this a crack. And I didn't even particularly think of publication. I just wanted to get the story down, and I wanted to take these these stories of our family and turn them into something that was more beautiful than the chaos that I was left surrounded by. I think it
Mm.
sort of is the definition of art, really, when you can take crap like that and reframe it, remold it, package it into something that is beautiful. And I always said that was sort of my mantra going through, was I wanted to make something beautiful out of this. I wanted to
Mm.
honor my siblings in that way. So yeah, as I said, it sort of evolved over time, but the galvanizing event was when my sister died.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously the book starts with the funeral as well, and almost culminates to the funeral as well in the end as well. And actually, I was wondering, at what point did you start like making kind of parallels between your life and your sort of your natural surroundings?
So you in that way you're referring to the sort of the parallel stories of the earthquakes and the
Mm.
family. Yeah. Um, it was interesting. I was writing the family story to start with, and it really wasn't working. And I went to a week long course in the Blue Mountains near Sydney. And it was a terrible time as a writer because I just was faced with the realization that the story was not working. I was rambling, it was going on too long. I had 30,000 words that I ended up throwing away. Um,
Mm.
and while I was there, I made a new friend, Amanda Webster, who had written 2 memoirs already. We went for a bushwalk and we were just chatting, exchanging stories about what we were there to write about. And I told her about the fact that we'd just survived the Christchurch earthquakes, and we were living in Australia as a result of leaving that behind us. We were looking for somewhere safer to live.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got into family stuff, and I was telling her about my dad's death, and she turned to me at one point, and we'd only just met, but she said, "It seems to me that your father dying was like an earthquake in your family." And really, it was an epiphany for me, and that was what kicked that whole idea off. And I think it's a really good example of how other people can influence your art and your creative process, and that take really stuck. And it wasn't that I knew exactly what to do with it straight away. It probably bubbled away in my subconscious for about 3 months. And then I read a book by Nick Flynn called The Ticking is the Bomb. And my book ended up kind of similar to his in structure. He wrote about two very disparate subjects. He wrote about the imminent arrival of his first child, and he contrasted that with writing about the torture in Abu Ghraib prison.
Oh, wow.
And these are two subjects that are so different, and I was really taken with how he tackled that and how he brought those two things together. And I thought I could do that. I could bring these two ideas together. In some ways, there was the two ideas I brought together had more in common than those that he did.
Yeah, of course.
And then as I researched earthquakes in New Zealand and seismic activity in general, I found these parallels, and it was almost like it was meant to be. It was like I was getting a big finger from the universe pointing over my shoulder saying, look here, this here, this is important, this is what you're looking for. And there was so many holy shit moments when I would do some research and something would just jump out at me as perfect. It would just be the perfect metaphor or the perfect representation of something I was trying to tell in the family story, but it was about geology or seismic stuff. So once I sort of set out on that path, it sort of laid itself out in front of me. I was very lucky. Things just sort of fell into place after that. This telling it in the 5 stages of an earthquake, that came later after talking to a publisher who said, well, I said to her, I think, have I taken this metaphor too far? And she said, no, I think you could push it a bit further. And that's when I overlaid the idea of the 5 stages of an earthquake over the whole thing. And that too was just sort of a moment of serendipity. I don't think you can take too much credit for some of that stuff. It's just, it's a lot of it's so subconscious, or it's the universe or something. It's the magic of being creative, I think. And I try not to take credit for that stuff because I think it just happens. Yeah.
Well, maybe you're a conduit for it, isn't it?
It'd be nice to think that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it worked out so well because it just made total sense. Like reading through the 5 stages and your own sort of life journey as you were going through it, and it did make sense. And obviously, you talk about sort of the definition of an aftershock right at the beginning, which was quite interesting because this is an after effect of a distressing or traumatic event, or a minor shock following the main shock of an earthquake. And I was just wondering, would you consider the first time you heard violence in 1969 the initial earthquake?
Well, that time I didn't hear violence. That's raised later, and so I'm writing then about being 2 or so years old and not being cognizant of what's going on, not having any memory of that, but that may be the root cause of everything that unfolded in our family from there on. We don't know. We'll never know if that's true or not. But yeah, so I suppose the answer to that is no. But I guess I knew it was I always knew it was there too. So yes and no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it kind of subconsciously it was around you, but not. Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I think I was aware my whole life, and things weren't quite as they should be in our home, and that was the root of all my anxiety as a child, I think, and lack of confidence. The inability to stand up for myself, when I was bullied at high school, you know, a lot of those things I can trace back to just life in that family, in that home. And it's not that it was, you know, as bad as some people get it. And I know a lot of people say that, people who've been through trauma say this, because we do tend to try and rank ourselves on a, well, you know, a trauma scale. But I think it's better to kind of think about how it impacted the individual. And I know that it impacted me quite deeply. And it's not even that my parents were meaning to be the way they were. It's just that they weren't emotionally mature enough to kind of rein themselves in. And so the ongoing effects of that on these three kids, myself included, I think my assessment is that a lot of it goes back to that, and it just played out so tragically over the course of our lives.
Yeah. And so I was wondering, so everything else that happened, sort of from, those sort of subconscious feelings initially, would you consider all those sort of traumatic events the aftershock?
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
the aftershocks, plural, I would say. And this is what I was so interested in when I was writing, was this idea of looking on my wall. I've got post-its with quotes, and one of them is by George Eliot, and its consequences are unpitying. And that
Hmm.
was that was one of the main ideas that I kept in my head the whole time of writing, was that, you know, these events were the result of things that happened that people didn't give any thought to the flow-on effects of,
Yeah.
and those are the aftershocks. Yeah, those are the 10,000 aftershocks, and so the 10,000 to me was both a finite and an infinite number. In terms of the earthquakes themselves in Christchurch, it was a finite number. It was almost like a limit that we as a family reached, and we were like, no more, we can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
But within our family, it's almost a number that's representative of infinite flow-on effects through
God,
lives. And that
definitely.
was why I called the book that. And when I asked my publisher, can I keep the title, she said, oh yes. And I was like, oh good, because it really does mean two things to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it works so well. It really does work so well on so many levels. And, and exactly, there was just so many parallels. And I was just wondering, what do you think the effects are? Obviously, you've been through this, which is when you live in kind of constant danger from like either external trauma or from even a natural disaster, which obviously you were going through as well.
Yeah. The ongoing effects. I was thinking about this today, funnily enough, with COVID. And I think it makes me, I can only speak for me, um, extremely risk averse. Yeah.
Mm,
Extremely aware of mortality.
mm,
And those two things probably sum me up right now. I've got friends who are going out for coffees and restauranting and planning on writers' festivals and things like that, and I just can't. I am basically still locked down. I mean, I've been out. I've had to go and get a uniform for my son who's starting school again next week, and I
mm,
do the things I absolutely have to, but I don't do the things that I don't have to. And
mm.
I always have 100 masks in my cupboard, and I have, I managed to track down some home tests, which are really hard to get here in Australia at the moment.
Oh,
I will put my mind to, those sorts of tasks, because to me that's survival. And I
mm,
think when you grow up with trauma and then you experience it, you get that reinforcement every time something new happens, that you have
yeah.
to work hard to stay alive on this planet. Some people skate through, not thinking about it, taking risks. My father was a bit like that. He hang glided. He landed his hang glider on our car once. He shredded himself through a barbed wire fence another time. He did crazy stuff,
Wow.
and for most of his life he got away with it. I just have never been that person. And it's been formative. Yeah. I'm very, very careful. It makes me a bit boring, but I'm still here.
Boring's good. Yeah, exactly. No, I agree. I'm like, I'm totally the same as you in terms of I used to be like that, and then I realized the impact of that, and then I was like, no, I actually prefer quiet, quiet
As
and
you get older
solitude.
too, don't you think?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so too. Maybe we do become naturally risk averse as we get older,
Yes,
without
that
even
makes sense.
realizing,
Yes,
because we
yes.
are going towards mortality as well. We're
Well, we
just
might
starting
break
to
a
become
hip,
more aware.
you know?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Very much the case. So, yeah, no, that does make sense. And it's so interesting because obviously when you think of like trauma, external trauma and natural disaster, that's coming from sort of the external side. And similarly, how do you think not feeling safe at maybe home or not feeling safe in your own mind can impact
Mm,
you in the long run? Because obviously you've had, your own personal story, your siblings personal story of, not being able to cope with safety in your own mind. And I'm
mm.
just wondering, how do you deal with that in the long run?
Gosh, that's a big question, isn't it? Well, I think it goes back to that same thing of being risk averse. I mean, I'm always trying to think ahead. I think I will
Mm,
always have a level of anxiety about survival. I get my pap smears, I get my mammograms, do all that stuff. Um, but I think it's interesting. This is another thing that's been an ongoing after effects from the earthquakes. Is I don't know if you or your listeners can relate to this, but when you get into bed at night and it's cozy, maybe it's the middle of winter and you're under your duvet and you're warm and you feel really safe,
mm,
and you snuggle down. Since the earthquakes, that has left me. I cannot achieve that level of comfort anymore.
wow.
And I think
Mm,
it's to do with the fact that earthquakes used to arrive at all hours of the day and night. And even going to bed and going into that ritual of snuggling in could be interrupted and was interrupted regularly at any time of the night, which would involve us racing to the boys' room to check that they were okay.
yes.
While we were basically still asleep, we would be running in our sleep down the hall. And I write in the book about how I felt like comfort that had slipped down the cracks somewhere and I'd lost it forever. And I have to say, I have not been able to get that back.
Mm,
And that pains me because I think there's nothing quite so delicious as that feeling, and I miss it. And I don't
mm,
know if it'll come back. It may over time, but it's been more than 10 years now. Um, so you have to think that that's fear that's
yeah.
living in my nervous system that has not dissipated. That's raised cortisol levels and that sort of thing. So, and then you think about your health and what's that doing to you, and you can do what you can do, right? You do your yoga and you exercise and you eat well and drink your water and all that sort of stuff. You get your therapy, but
Mm,
even so, that is still missing. And yeah, that I feel like that's been a price for that experience. Yeah. I mean, it's again, I wouldn't say it's as bad as having lost a loved one, but
mm, mm.
for me, that's something that I've noticed. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's huge. I'm like, just not being able to kind of sleep properly. That can
Just to
just
get that level of comfort. I can sleep, but I
yeah,
don't feel, how you feel that 100% safe thing? You just,
peaceful.
yeah,
Yeah.
peaceful. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, it just plays havoc though with your nervous system being on
Yeah.
alert.
Not
God,
helped by the other day. A few weeks ago, we had a 5.9 earthquake in Melbourne, which is unheard of.
what? Yeah,
Yeah.
what? Oh no, that's awful. You've been
Yeah.
moved.
I know. And it was like, I thought I was having a flashback. I was in bed, it was the morning, and I thought, what the hell is this? No, this is the same
No.
place. And yeah, it
Oh,
was it was a way away. It was about 100 k's away, but it was a real goodie. But I still have my radar. I called it. I said it was a 5, and it came in at a 5.9. So
wow,
yeah,
wow. God, oh that's horrifying. Yeah, geez, you move like
yes,
country to escape them, and then there it
exactly.
is. Oh
Yeah.
God, I'm like, see, I will never complain about UK weather again because we don't get anything in comparison. We just get rain and we complain about the rain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then you can
Oh,
cozy up under your duvet. You're fine.
yeah, it's true. I guess so. Again, one day maybe you need to come down to the UK, come up to the
Well, I
UK,
would
and
love to. I would love to. Yeah, that'd be great.
yeah, and actually, exactly. I'm like this, it just kind of naturally comes onto this question, which is how do you find like any semblance of safety in any of these situations, whether it's, the the earthquakes, or whether it's even having to deal with your mother's behavior from
Hmm.
time to time, which obviously was quite nerve-wracking in itself.
Yes.
And I was just like, how did you find any safety in any of those situations?
Well, I think, a lot of this is in the memoir too. I think it came down to lessons that I learned about my life, and I can only speak from my experience, but um, one of them is that I can trust myself. I can trust
Mm,
myself to survive a lot. You know,
mm,
I've proved that I have a track record and I'm still here. Not to say that my siblings who are not still here were any worse than me, or, you know, weaker or anything like
yeah,
that.
of
It's just the
course.
way that everything fell for them. Um, so that's one thing. I can be in a bad spot and I can say to myself, you can get through this. You just have to take it step by step, minute by minute.
Mm,
If it's second by second, then that's what you do. You just keep facing front. One of the other things I learned was that people will help you. People will
mm,
support you, whether they're friends or a therapist or just the neighbor or this person who smiles at you when you're walking down the road.
mm,
People want to help people. And I have this very strong belief that, you know, when the chips are down, the best comes out. And
mm,
that was what happened in Christchurch. Everybody was suffering and everybody helped each other through it. And I know that there are issues around COVID at the moment, people who don't,
mm,
for whatever reason, get on board with vaccination or mask wearing or whatever. But on the whole, people are stepping up and they are helping each other by doing the right things, and
mm,
they're thinking beyond themselves. They're thinking of community. They're thinking of the healthcare workers. They're trying to, on the whole, the majority of people are doing those things. And I think there's great power in that. And I think that's where our strength is.
mm.
And I think it's also important to ask for help and to seek that out. And I was never shy about that. I'm never shy about putting my hand up and saying, I don't know what this is, or I don't know how to cope, or whatever it is. I will reach out, and you only build a network of support if you do that, I think. And I know that people get so low that they then aren't able to reach out, and
Yeah.
that's I think where it becomes a real problem. So I think the answer to that is to reach out before you get so low that you
Mm,
can't, to just put your hand up and say, I'm not coping. You see it every day on
yeah.
Twitter, for example, and the pylon
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
support is quite astounding. People want to help. People want to be part of a solution. They want to make other people feel better, and
Hmm.
that's what we are. That's who we are. And I think I I put a lot of stock in that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I could probably talk a lot about that stuff. I just think when COVID first started happening, for example, some of my friends were really freaking out, and I said to them, "We'll get through it. We'll be okay.
Yeah.
We just have
Hmm.
to do all these things. We have to just take care of each other. We have to do the right thing. We may be locked down, whatever. We just do what they tell us. We'll get through it." I've got a friend
Yeah.
who's 95 and she lived through the Blitz. She's
Oh.
incredible. I take a lot of strength from that. Um, just an incredibly strong woman. And
Is she the one in the book by any
yes,
chance?
she is. And I
Yeah,
remember
she's
when
great.
when I remember when COVID first started, she said, "Oh, I don't know what they're all on about. It's only a bug. It's not Germans." It was,
Well, yeah.
sorry to the Germans listening, but it was, it's true. In some ways, it's not man coming to get you. It's just
Mm,
a thing that happened. So we just keep plodding on day by day. Yeah,
yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because you do mention, I think, the key to survival is defined as the ability to adapt to change. But if you're miserable, are you still surviving? And so I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on this now?
yeah. I think as long as it's a temporary state, I think you are. Yeah, I mean, obviously you are, and I think you just, I mean, not to sound Pollyanna-ish, but sometimes life's tough, and you've just got to grit your teeth, and it's about just clawing your way through. Sometimes it's not pretty. It's not pretty, and it's not pleasant. It's not
Mm,
fun, but you you will get there if you just keep, and I talk about in the book about you wake up breathing, and
yeah.
so you just keep breathing. If that's all you can do, that's what you do. Yeah,
Yeah. Now, and I have to ask because obviously, I'm like, the relationship obviously between your family members was obviously quite difficult, to say the least. And I'm just wondering, like, how would you describe? I'm like, for you, the environment for each of your siblings and yourself, because obviously everyone was sort of treated in their own sort of way. And
yeah.
what do you think? Yeah, so how would you describe that, like living in that situation?
Well, I mean, the first thing to note is we were children and we didn't understand that this
Mm,
was anything unusual, and that's normal in a
mm,
family like ours. Um, Obviously, you have no baseline to measure anything against,
yeah.
and so I would say, we fit a very normal pattern for a dysfunctional family. My sister was the scapegoat. I was the golden child, and my brother was also a golden child, but not so much for my father, who thought he should be more masculine and tough.
Mm,
Um, and he was very very gentle. I always say he was the most kind. He was the kindest person I've ever known. Really,
mm,
he was so soft. And when at his funeral, one of his friends got up and told a story about how they were all going surfing one day. They were all piled into a car, and they were all dogging on some mutual friend of theirs. And my brother very quietly piped up and said, "You guys shouldn't be talking about him like that when he's not here." And that
oh,
was his lingering memory of my brother. And it made me proud because, this was in the days when people didn't really do that.
no.
Um, so, yeah, getting back to your question, yeah, we played roles, and we knew what our role was. I was the good
Mm,
girl, my sister was the naughty girl, my brother was the one who kept quiet and stayed out of trouble.
mm,
And those roles followed us into adulthood. Um, and my mother would pick a favorite from time to time, and it would shift, and
mm.
she would talk about the others behind their backs. Yeah, it was difficult to navigate. It was very stressful. Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, God. I, for the life of me, like, I'm like, given I've lived through similar situation, I have a similar relationship with my family, and so it's I always wondered, like, why did you think your mother thought it was necessary to tell you and your siblings certain kinds of information, especially as children, that just is completely inappropriate?
yeah.
Um, why do you think she did that?
Why do I think she did that? I think she thought that I was getting too close to my father, and she wanted to um, insert herself into that situation and say, I
Right.
think part of her is genuinely traumatized. And I think part of her wanted to say, look at me, I'm suffering here, and you're cozying up to your father. You're getting to know him, and I'm not comfortable with that because you don't know the real him. I think she genuinely believed what she was telling me was what had happened. I don't think she thought she was lying, and I don't know if she was lying, but that's the infuriating part of this whole story, right?
Yeah.
Because
Jeez.
I'm left with so many questions still. I have had to make peace with the fact that I will never know. I will leave this
Mm.
earth not knowing. So that's sort of mine to bear. And in that sense, I wish she'd never said anything.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think she felt I was getting too close to him and moving away from her, and I was hers. I was her little mini me, and
Mm.
that would not do. That would not do. So there was that, and there was also that feeling of, wait a minute, he's the bad guy. You don't get to love him and have that relationship with him. Um, yeah, and just a need for control, I think, also just
Mm.
overarching that, everything. Just yeah, very messed up. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you're trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense, and
Mm.
that's always you're on a hiding to nothing. So I don't tend to waste too much time thinking about that. I just
Yeah.
think that was really shitty. That was really awful that
Yeah.
happened. And I think what I took from it when I became a mother was I tried really hard. I don't expect that I got it right 100% of the time at all, but I tried really hard to not be like that. I used to say to my friends, "Oh, well, it's easy. I just take what my mother did and I try and do a
Yeah.
180."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I was wondering, is that how you kind of made peace with it in a way?
I think so. Yeah, I think I'm very much at peace with it now. I don't have any bitterness about anything. I get on with my
Mm.
life. I accept that it formed me, that it made me who I am,
Mm.
but I don't have any lingering. Um, I don't sit here and cry over it or think about it too much. It's I think writing the book really helped in that regard. It helped me put a
Mm.
narrative around everything that happened and almost
Yeah.
close that book. Not on the memories of my siblings or anything like that, but just
Mm.
to, um, you know, what they say is true. Joan Didion said, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. And that's what this feels like. I wrote this, I made sense of it. Um, and now I'm able to put it aside and get on with my life, with my family, and
Mm.
do better, I guess, do better and live well. And the lessons I take are about the very fleeting nature of life, and that we don't really have time to sit here um, with regrets and recriminations and looking for vengeance or anything like that. That's just such a waste of precious minutes and hours, right?
Yeah. No, totally. It makes total sense. And would you say then, how do you feel about your current environment then now? Now that you're mostly settled, despite obviously COVID and and the 5.9 earthquake in Melbourne, but yeah, like,
Gotta keep it
would
interesting,
you
right?
say, yeah, geez, they keep you on your toes, isn't it? Yeah. So, like,
Yeah.
how do you feel about your current environment now?
Um, I have mixed feelings. I'll be honest with you. I I don't know. I think if you asked
Mm.
any immigrant this question, it would be the same.
Mhm.
You would rather you were able to stay at home, right? But often there are reasons why you can't stay. There are reasons that push you out. And it's like I wrote in the book, people would be saying to me, "Oh, what do you think of Australia?"
Yeah.
And I was supposed to say, "It's great." And it is great
Mm.
most of the time. But like any country, it has its issues. And sometimes I really do miss home.
Mm.
I miss the laid back nature of New Zealanders. We really are. I've learned a lot actually about my own culture from coming here, and it's not so far away from New Zealand. It's kind of aligned, but
Mm.
there are subtle things that I miss, and that really laid back, easygoingness. I really do miss, and the friendliness. Living in a big city is quite different to living in a small
Yeah.
town in New Zealand, and I mean the entire population of New Zealand could fit in Melbourne, and that's a culture shock of its own. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I would say it's been a really great move in terms of
Mm.
opportunity, and I've seen a lot of things I would never have seen. I love the wildlife here. I love the
Mm.
outdoors and the landscape, and my friends are amazing. They're um, again, there's pros and cons, right? Because in New Zealand,
Yeah.
it's little things. Like in New Zealand, nobody hugs their friends really. My
Oh,
girlfriends
really?
don't
Oh.
hug or anything. But here, first day of school, all these mothers wanted to hug me, and I was just like, whoa, this is different. So, and I like
Mm.
that. That's loosened me up a bit because I was a bit uptight on that stuff, the physical affection. So it swings and roundabouts. I
Yeah.
have missed not being able to get back to New Zealand for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
That's hard because even though it's very seismic, I love to walk in the Southern Alps, and
Mm.
I've done several trips on my own. My husband would take the boys back to Canada to visit his family, and I would go home to
Oh.
New Zealand and do some hiking. And I haven't been able
Mm.
to do that. I haven't seen my eldest daughter for a long time, and that's been tough.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, yeah, I would, being completely honest with you, it has its ups
Mhm.
and downs. And I think, as I say, I think any immigrant would probably
Definitely.
share that view. Yeah.
Yeah, the homesickness. Yeah, you were
Yes.
mentioning. Yeah, it stays, isn't it? Even
Yeah.
after all these years.
Yeah.
Mm.
Exactly. You can't help it. It's just, you know, the Māori have a term, like you're rooted in your whenua, in your land, and I really
Mm.
feel that quite strongly. Yeah.
Of course, yeah, and I assume that the indigenous cultures of each country is so different to one another, and you're rooted with the Maori people, of course.
Well,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's just what I'm more familiar with. I wouldn't claim to have any extensive knowledge of that at all, but yeah, it's just different. And yeah, but hopefully soon we can get back and visit, and things might resume
Fingers
again. Who
crossed.
knows?
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
I'm hoping by the end of this year, hopefully, Max, we can
yeah.
finally
Where are you
start
hoping to go
going back
back
to normal.
to?
Well, just travel. Yeah, because I
Just
can't
anywhere,
stay in
yeah.
London. Yeah, just it drives me crazy as well. Like I need to have a bit of nature or
Ah, yeah,
something. Being in the city all the time, it just drives me mad. And
yeah. You need some
um,
regreening.
exactly, you totally do.
Yeah,
Just for your mind.
yeah,
So yeah, just can't wait to get out. So yeah.
yeah.
Oh God.
Poor
Well,
thing.
Michelle, thank you so much for chatting with me, and I really appreciate it. Really amazing, amazing writing. Such a great book that you've written, and so honest and so just beautifully written. So I really, really am grateful that you shared that with the world. And also, that you took the time today to speak to me today. So thank you.
You're very welcome, and it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.